I know who slept in today. So if you've purchased a car or a house, especially anything on credit, you signed a contract, right? They didn't just say you go to Wells Fargo or somewhere and you're buying your multiple hundreds of $1,000 house and you are signing you're getting ready to get a mortgage. They didn't just say, put it here, pal. Just let's shake on it. And you pay us every month for, the next 30 years or whatever. And if you go to buy a car and you're financing it, the car dealer doesn't just shake on it. Like, you're going to sign a bunch of stuff. Why do they have us do that? Because somebody somewhere started lying and not living up to their end of the deal. Somewhere in the past, somebody shook on it and they didn't keep their word. And they lied. Lying kind of comes natural to us because if you think about when you were a child, think about as far back as you can remember, and you did something you weren't supposed to do and you knew you would be punished for it. Most kids, they'll look up at their parents with these beautiful little eyes and they'll look at their parent and they'll say, did you do that? And whether they did it or not, the beautiful little child says, no, I didn't do that. And they will lie to you. Our middle daughter, when she was just a tiny little toddler learning how to brush her own teeth, we would say, hey, girls, brush your teeth before you go to bed. Daddy will be in to tuck you in, we'll say our prayers and do our bedtime routine. And I started noticing, it doesn't smell like she brushed her teeth. Did you brush your teeth? Uh-huh, I did. Well, the next night, after she started telling me that, I went in and felt the toothbrush before I asked her that question. Parents are smart like that. And then she had to confess, big tears, I'm sorry. Now, when a child does that, it's not an evil thing. It's just a child checking out those boundaries, seeing what they can get by with. The problem is some people never outgrow that. And they continue to tell lies and be dishonest even into adulthood. That word liar, it sounds harsh, doesn't it? Oh, they're a liar. So what we've done is come up with softer words. Well, they embellished that story a little bit of embellishment. They stretched the truth. They exaggerated. Those are other words to say they lied. To ensure that we're telling the truth, if you go in a court of law and you're going to be a witness, they make you put your hand on the Bible and we can all say it together. Do you promise to tell the whole and nothing but the truth, right? We had to come up with an oath because somewhere somebody didn't tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And so now we have to go in and promise before God with our hand on the Bible to do that. And that started young too, because on the playground, it wasn't an oath on a Bible. It was cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. You remember those? That sounds harsh too. I've officiated I don't know how many weddings, dozens and dozens of weddings, and it's always beautiful. The bride and the groom write their own vows, especially when they do that. It's just so powerful. It even makes me tear up when I don't even know them, because it's this beautiful exchange of two people offering their lives to each other for all of life. And it's a beautiful ceremony with the vows and the oath that they're making with each other. But in reality, do you only need about 7 or 8 words to get married? I've never said, hey, do you want the shortest version of the ceremony possible? If that ever happens, here's what I'm going to say. Here's how it goes. Take her, yep. Take him, yep. Took, you're now married. That's really all it's needed. But we do vows because it's more special, because it kind of deepens the relationship. Well, Jesus is getting ready to teach us something about vows and oaths. But what he's really getting at, and what we're going to learn today, is that we should be believable people. And we shouldn't have to do anything beyond a simple yes or a no. And we did this series through the Sermon on the Mount for one simple reason. I believe in the church today, in the lives of those who follow Christ, there is this tug of war going on spiritually on where authority lies. Where is it? Is it cultural authority or is it biblical authority? Now, we would all go, oh, we're in church, it's biblical authority. But when you look at the way people who would wear the name of Christ try to solve the world's problems, unfortunately, a lot of people who would wear the name of Christ, call themselves Christian, church leaders, would lean more towards cultural authority when it comes to answering the difficult problems that face our world. And so what we're doing through the Sermon on the Mount, we're determining what Jesus believed, and then we're just going to go with that. That's always the smart way to go. If Jesus believes it and Jesus says it, let's just go with that, whether we like it or not, whether we're comfortable or not, whether it's culturally appropriate or not, we're just going to go with what he said. And so what I'm hoping happens throughout this series, we're in week 8, we're going all the way up to 15. We might even make it 16. I don't know yet. But what about the tug of war that's going on in your heart, in your life? Do I go with cultural authority or biblical authority? And I hope to equip you even more to go with biblical authority. And in the Sermon on the Mount, here's what Jesus is trying to do. He's talking to a group of people who have been trained by their rabbis, who had grown up with this oral tradition, and he's helping them wrestle through their struggle between outside behavior and internal transformation. Because they were really good at modifying outside behavior to match exactly what God said. That would be the letter of the law. So he's talked to them about murder. He's talked to them about adultery and lust. Last week we talked about divorce. And they were doing a really good job at obeying the letter of the law. But Jesus wants to move them towards this internal transformation. Because the way they had lived their lives was they were looking for loopholes and the way out of the laws that God had given them. But Jesus wanted something more. He wanted a deep internal transformation. And so when it comes to truth telling, Jesus gives them the instruction they needed in Matthew chapter 5, beginning at verse 33. He says, "Again, you've heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made.' But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond that comes from the evil one." So if they were being permissive in their attitude about divorce, and we learned that they were last week, they were being permissive as well in their teaching about truth-telling, about oaths. And so like every week, I'm going to share with you what Jesus meant and what those people would have heard when they heard him say those words, so in its context. And then how do we take the context of what Jesus said 2,000 years ago and apply it to our lives today? So again, let's look at that first verse, 33. "Again, you've heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made.'" So he's quoting what they would have been taught. A rabbi would have probably said things like that. It would have been a saying that, hey, don't break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you've made. And the Old Testament law that they would have grown up with, it did instruct people to make oaths in the name of the Lord. And the reason they would make an oath in the name of the Lord, like, I promise this before God, is because they believed, which was true, that if I make an oath to God and I break it, then God himself will punish me. And so they were wrestling with, how do I go back on my word but not put myself in a position to where I will be punished by the Almighty God? And so, because when people made an oath to the Lord, they knew they're going to keep it. So they're looking for a way around it, so they started making oaths to other things. And Jesus addresses that in verses 34 and 35 when he says, "But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king." So while they would have honored their oaths to the Lord, they would not have always honored other oaths. In other words, if you shook on it and you said, I swear by the temple or the holy city of Jerusalem, and then you went back on your word and somebody says, hey, you swore an oath to me. Yeah, but I didn't swear to God. I didn't make that oath to God. So they felt like, well, it's okay. I still didn't break the law. I didn't swear an oath to God that I broke. I just swore an oath to something else, so that's okay. See, for them, truth had turned into a formula, like a 2 or 3 step formula. If it's in God's name, then I'll keep it. If it's not in God's name, well, then what does God care? And I can go ahead and break it. So Jesus ends up saying, don't swear by anything. Just don't use things to swear by. And then all the things Jesus mentions in 34 and 35, God created anyway. They were part of his creation. And so he's saying, don't use those things either, because that's the same thing as using my name. And then Jesus gives more details because he anticipates quickly that, well, they're going to look for a way around this one too. And he says, and do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. You may have heard people say, I swear by the hair on my head, or I swear by something else. And Jesus is saying, don't swear by yourself, because you don't have control over the future. You don't have control over the past. And then Jesus moves and gives them the heart of the matter of what he's trying to communicate. He's trying to move them from external behavior modification to internal transformation. And he says this, all you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. So here's what he's trying to say. You've been so set on figuring out a way to lie that nobody trusts each other's words. And so here's what he's teaching them. Keep your word. Tell the truth. Jesus was teaching that honest people and truthful people don't need to resort to oaths. Their words need to be so strong that a simple yes or a simple no will do. You don't even have to shake hands. You don't have to make an oath. You don't have to sign a contract. Just let yes or no be your word. There was another group. So the people Jesus was talking to, they were all Jewish. There could have been thousands of them. And he's trying to bring them out of the behavioral focused religion they'd been a part of and bring them into this transformational environment. But there was another group of people during that time, and we know about this group of people because of a historian named Josephus who lived in the 1st century. And Josephus mentions this group of people called the Essenes. It was a sect of Judaism. Probably none of them were there listening to Jesus that day. But the Essenes had a very high moral standard. They had a very high regard for the truth. They would have been very conservative thinkers. And so when it came to the truth, they would have believed what Jesus said. Yeah, you don't need to make an oath. Just tell the truth. And in one of Josephus's writings, he makes this observation about the Essenes. He says, they are eminent for fidelity and are ministers of peace. Whatsoever they also say is firmer than an oath, but swearing is avoided by them. And they esteem it worse than perjury. For they say that he who cannot be believed without swearing by God is already condemned. Here's what that means. He's saying it's worse for you to try to swear to something, because that's worse than lying. Because if your word is so bad you have to swear it to something else, then your word is of no value at all. And so no wonder Jesus says, look, just let your yes be yes, no be a no. You're worried about the letter of the law, keep your oaths you make that you swear to God. And he's saying, look, the spirit of the law is that you live as a believable person. And so he's boiling it down to the heart level command, be an honest, believable person. Oath taking then was an indication of dishonesty. You don't need that. You just need one word, yes or no. Now, what does that mean for us? So that's the context in which these thousands of people would have heard Jesus speaking like, okay, we can't make oaths anymore. It just has to be a yes or a no. Jesus took it right down to the heart level. And so now they have a decision to make. Are they going to follow what Jesus believes? Because Jesus believes that honest people just have to say yes or no. See, but we have contracts because we have dishonesty. We have vows because people break them. And here's the first observation about truth, the way it applies to us. Telling the truth matters. It really does. And I know in our culture it doesn't feel like that, but still, as a follower of Christ, telling the truth matters. I read this survey that was done over a 10-year period. In 2006, 42% of Americans believed that it was okay to lie. It's okay. If you need to, you're backed up against the wall, yeah, it's okay to lie. In 2016, that number jumped to 54% who say it's okay to lie. So that means a little more than half of this room would say, oh yeah, it's fine to lie. And then if you look deeper into those percentages, 52% say it's okay to lie to make the story more interesting. Now you're going to be suspect of half the people that tell you a story. Like, is that real? Is their life really that good? I mean, social media makes this even more easier for people to do. Is that embellished? Is that stretched a little bit? But half the people, a little bit more, say, it's fine if it makes the story more interesting. And now you're going to be suspect of everybody that tells you a story. Is that real? Not really sure. 51% say, I thought about asking for a show of hands on this one, but I'm not going to do it. 1% say it's okay to lie about your age. 48% say that it's okay to lie to get a day off work. I feel bad. I feel really, I need a personal day. I need a personal emotional day or whatever. 48% say it's okay. And here's the stat to me that, and should be to all of us, when you break it down generationally and you take the generation 40 and down to 20, when they were asked about is it okay to lie, that number was no longer 54%. 75% of the people in that age category said it's okay to lie. Now, Jesus identified the source of lies. In John chapter 6, he calls Satan the father of lies. He invented lies, he lives lies, and he is the father of all lies. We should not be surprised that the younger the ages get in our culture, the less problem they have with lying because they have grown up in a world that says it's okay to lie. It's okay not to tell the truth. When kids are raised in a culture that does not value truth, and then you mix in the facade of social media, it's no wonder that number keeps going up as the ages go down. I would like to see, how about from age 20 down to 10? What do they think about lying? Because they're the ones being told, you can determine your own truth, you can label yourself, you can call yourself whatever you feel. There is no such thing as objective truth. It's all subjective to how you feel. So no wonder more and more younger people are just okay with lies because they've grown up hearing them every single day. From do whatever you feel to you can keep that from your parents, you don't have to tell them. So we should not be surprised. In fact, we should be alarmed that the younger they get, the more okay they are with lies. So telling the truth matters. Telling the truth is better for you. It's better physically, it's better emotionally. University of Notre Dame followed 110 people over a period of 10 weeks, and they told half of them to lie and half of them to tell the truth. In everything they were doing, you tell the truth, you guys lie. And they checked up on them with a weekly polygraph test. And here's what they found out. Those who were able to reduce the number of lies they told had fewer mental health complaints, such as feeling tense, and fewer physical health complaints, such as headaches, than those who did not. Why is that? It takes effort to lie. If you lie on a regular basis, you're either caught a lot or you have to have a very good memory. Because you have to remember two things when you lie. You have to remember, one, what really happened, And then number two, you have to remember what you said about what happened. I grew up in a single parent home, teenage boy, lied to my mother a lot. But mom was a lot smarter than I gave her credit for. Because she would kind of file away the stories. She's 87 now, still drives, still doing great. And I bring this stuff up and we laugh about it every now and then. So mom would remember the story I told and how I told it. I wouldn't remember that. I just remember, got out of that one. Because in those days, there was no tracking. She was just at my mercy. Whatever I wanted to tell her is what I told her. But then she had a way of catching me. She would ask me about the story later. Say, hey, you said this and you said that. And I was like, or what happened then? Now, you told me what happened then. I was like, well, whatever I told you. I was like, whatever I said, what'd I say? Oh, yeah, that was it. That's exactly what happened. Until finally, it just became so exhausting. I was like, I'm done. I'm not lying about this anymore. It's just exhausting. I don't have a good enough memory for it. And as you get older, it's harder to remember really what happened anyway. So if you add a lie on top of that, you're going to be exhausted all the time. So eventually, I just decided to tell her the truth. Telling the truth is better for you because lying can lead to guilt, and guilt is toxic. Guilt can lead to emotional and physical problems, depression, high blood pressure, among many others. So telling the truth is just better for you. Also, telling the truth doesn't mean you get to be rude. So you might be sitting there going, oh, yeah, I'm going to tell them the truth. I'm going to let them have it. I'm going to tell them the truth. The Apostle Paul tells us how to speak words of truth to each other. We're supposed to. We're supposed to tell each other the truth. We're supposed to be confrontational when necessary. It should never be an enjoyable thing to be confrontational, but we're supposed to be that for each other. In fact, the Apostle Paul said it to a first century church, and he recorded it in the book of Ephesians, and he said, instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become, in every respect, the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ. So, truthfulness and growth, they're connected. See, the only reason we've ever had to add anything past yes or no is because of dishonesty. We need contracts because people can't be trusted. We have to put our hand on a Bible and swear to it because we tend to lie and leave out the details. So, telling the truth doesn't mean you get to be rude, but you still have to tell the truth. Just do it in love. Telling the truth also builds trust. How many of you, and I can ask for a show of hands, how many of you have ever been lied to? All of us probably have been lied to. And if you think you haven't, you have. Someone somewhere has lied to you. Sometimes the lies get so deep that someone breaks trust and hurts you. Someone you put trust in, someone you believed in, and they hurt you. And here's what people tend to do. They get hurt, they step back, they build a wall, and then they make everybody else pay for it. And maybe you're one of those people who say, I will never trust again. I'm going to look at everybody with suspicion, and I'm not going to trust because that hurt too bad for me to let that happen again. Now, if that's you, I'm going to tell you how to learn to trust people. Write this down. Here's how you learn to trust people. You trust people. That's the only way to learn how to trust people. And yes, maybe you were burned in the past. Maybe you were burned more than one time in the past. But the only way you're going to stop making everybody around you pay is just learn to trust people. Does that mean you have to take a risk? It does. But I would choose that life every time over the one of being a walled off person that makes everybody else pay because somebody else hurt me somewhere in the past. And so for you, if it's hard to trust, let yourself start to trust again. And watch what God does with that. It's worth the risk. It's worth it. Telling the truth over time, it builds character. And if you're someone who struggles with telling the truth, you can take decades of character building and destroy it with one lie. So telling the truth, it can build trust over time, and lying can immediately destroy it. So what if you're caught in a lie? What if you're like, uh-oh, that is not the sermon I wanted to hear today. And you know you're in the middle of a lie. Confess it, put it behind you, and just start trusting again. Telling the truth reflects a new life. So if you struggle with telling the truth, even after you said yes to Jesus, your truth telling should reflect what's in your heart. Remember, Jesus is trying to move from just modifying outward behavior, which is what they were doing, to internal transformation. And internal transformation leads us to a place where we can be trusted simply because we say so. We all know people like that. We all probably know someone that you know if they tell you they're going to do it, they do it. And if they tell you something's true, you know it's true. And there's no doubt about it. I have a big brother. He would not lie to me, but everything he would tell me, I would know. If he says, I'm going to do this on this day, he does it. If he says, I'm going to do this for you, he does it. And we all know people like that. Because telling the truth reflects a new life. To the church at Colossae, the Apostle Paul wrote these words, do not lie to each other. And he tells them why. Since you've taken off your old self with its practices, think behavioral modification, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of its creator. Changing your outward behavior will never get you to a place where you'll be renewed. If you want to be renewed, you have to let God, through Christ, get a hold of your heart. See, the image of God is truth, and if we accept Christ into our life, we accept that truth, and he renews us. He changes us. It turns out, if you've read through all the Sermon on the Mount, it turns out Jesus knows exactly what he's talking about. That everything he said reflected what he believed, and when it comes to truth-telling, he's just trying to give us the pathway to a better life, to the full life that he promises us. So just start out telling the truth, confess a lie when you do it, and move right back to the truth. Imagine the freedom of not having to have anyone say to you, are you sure? Will you really do that? Are you really going to come through for me? And you have the freedom for no one to say that to you because you tell the truth. Your yes is a yes and your no is a no. Imagine being a person with integrity that didn't exaggerate, that didn't embellish, that didn't lie, and present a life to the world that's not really you at all. Imagine the freedom of not having to live like that, because every command from Jesus, every teaching from Jesus is to lead us closer and closer to the life of freedom he wants us to all have. So this week, go live that. Be truthful. And unfortunately, you still have to sign contracts and promissory notes and all that because of all those liars in the past that didn't fulfill their obligation. But as we interact with each other in the family of God, be such a person that when you say yes, it's yes, and when you say no, it's no. Let's pray. God, thank you for this powerful teaching from Jesus and the way it reflects his heart to transform us from the inside out. And God, I pray for people who struggle with trust. God, I pray you give them the strength to trust again. And I pray for people who are caught in deep lies right now that you would guide them to the way of repentance and change and a life of truth rather than a lie. God, convict us when we don't tell the truth and when we need to change. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.